So for our next story, I would like to bring in my favorite economist, Richard Wolff, into the conversation. And just Richard Wolff has some warnings for us. He'd like us to know what it is that we're facing. And so I'd like to bring him in here and just show a few clips of his and what he's warning us of and trying to draw our attention to is the fact that we are already in the midst of a class war. And we have to be aware of that because the folks in the upper class, they're aware of the class war. Folks that, the wealthiest, the 1%, they're aware of the class war. And so working class people have to build an awareness of the fact that we are already in the midst of a class war and know how we fight that war. So here's Richard Wolff. The first clip is going to be from him on the Thom Hartmann program. Great show. Check it out on YouTube. Airs pretty much daily, I think, 5 days a week. And this is him talking to Thom Hartmann. And we're just going to watch, again, a few clips of Richard Wolff, and then we'll come back and discuss.
Before we can talk about what has to come next, there has to be some kind of end to the make-believe, to the notion that we are in a place where fiddling around at the edges of our economic difficulties is adequate. I mean, that's what Republicans and Democrats alike have been doing. If you watch the debates these days, it is surrealistic. In the midst of a crash that is like the greatest depression of the 1930s, which was the greatest crash of capitalism until the one we're in now, you would imagine that you're on another planet. Really? In the depths of the Greatest Depression, you're going to reduce the amount of help you give to unemployed people when half their jobs are never coming back, as per your quotation, when the jobs that will be there will be under enormous pressure from the employer to cut wages, to cut benefits, to demand more time, a speedier process. The worst isn't the people who won't get a job. The worst is the people who will discover that the job they've had all along, or the one they're returning to, is going to be occurring in an economy that is geared up to take the most away from the mass of people as the way to get through it. Let me put it one other way. There is a phrase called class war. Americans are now going to have to understand that that's where we are, and that we are going into a period of time, whoever wins the presidency in November, of unparalleled historical conflict as we try to figure out who is going to have to give up what in order to reconstruct a functioning economy.
All right, so that's the first clip there. Pull up our next clip here. This second clip is a clip from a earlier appearance. This is from June, actually, and this was him on RJ Eskow's podcast. And so, again, he's just talking more about the class war that we're in, and he just digs a little bit deeper into this and tries to really explain why it's a class war and how to recognize it as a class war. So let's just check this clip out. I'm going to play it at 1.5 times speed. If it's going too slow, I might have to double it, so it might the speaking may be fast. I apologize for that. I'm just trying to get through it because we're on a time crunch. So here we go. Second clip, Richard Wolff.
When you throw 42 million people, and that's the official count, out of work over the last, let's say, 10 weeks, you are declaring, whether you intend it or not, really is irrelevant. You are declaring class war against the 160 million people in the United States labor force. And let me explain why. First of all, 42 million, that's more than a quarter of the labor force in this country. So however you quarrel about the details, we're talking at least a 25% level of unemployment. And that equals the worst level that unemployment reached in the Great Depression, namely in the year 1933. So we are at, and in all likelihood, likely to exceed that level of unemployment, which would qualify what we're going through as the worst crisis of capitalism in the history of the United States. It remains to be seen whether the capitalisms in other parts of the world follow suit. All right, here's what that means. For that 25%, 1/4, and let's be clear, if 1/4 of the workers of the country are out of work, there will be almost no family that isn't touched by this. Mother or father, but also son or daughter, or cousin or uncle or aunt or grandma. Someone's unemployed in virtually every family, in many more than one. Those people have diminished incomes. Those people have diminished self-esteem. Those people need to lean on, borrow from their fellow family members. It is therefore crunch time for all of them, one way or another, more or less. Then there's the uncertainty, which can be as destructive as anything else I've said, here's the uncertainty. You don't know whether the job you lost because of the pandemic, will be there when you get ready to go back to work. Your employer doesn't know either. Many variables will determine it, but you certainly have to be uncertain and anxiety ridden about whether you'll have a job to go back to, and that only makes your unemployment worse. But let me turn next to the 3/4 of the labor force, roughly 120 million Americans, who are still working, who have a job. When I said class war, I meant they are the victims or about to become the victims of that class war. And here's why. When you have massive unemployment, it acts economically like an invitation to every employer, large, medium, and small, to take advantage of the unemployment, to go to the workers you are still employing and say to them, look, John, look, Mary, I've been having a hard time. The pandemic has hurt our business, the economic crash even more so. I'm very sorry, but you're going to have to take a wage cut of 20%. You're going to have to lose your pension. You're going to have to take fewer holidays. You're going to have to come in a half hour early. You're going to have to stay a little bit longer. I'm going to have to cut your lunch hour. You get the picture. And the employer does this because he can. And why can he? Because there's 42 million unemployed people. If the existing worker doesn't accept reduced wages, reduced benefits, worse working conditions, or whatever, then there's 42 million people unemployed, having a harder time with each passing week as they use up their savings, they use up the toleration of the people they share households with, etc., desperate, who will take the job at the reduced wage and the reduced benefits. You're going to see that happening in the months and years again, across the board. That's why I call this a class war. It's a wholesale attack on the standard of living, the standard of consumption, the standard of work of the entire American working class. And in case...
Oh, right. So that's Richard Wolff there, dropping knowledge, y'all. And so you got to listen. When Richard Wolff speaks, I listen. It's Cornell West, then Cornell West, Noam Chomsky, Richard Wolff for me, pretty much. That dude he's been right about so much. He's been right about all of this when all of these other economists have been wrong for years and years and decades. I mean, this guy has been on point in his warned us of these things, and they just keep happening. He talks about the recessions, the what they call the business cycle, the economic downturns, and how in capitalism every 4 to 7 years, no matter where capitalism has existed anywhere in the world, every 4 to 7 years on average, they have an economic downturn, what they call the business cycle, or a recession, or a depression, or a retraction, a contraction. They have all kinds of cute names for it. Why? Because and he says it's happened so much they could come up with all these different names for it and try to, essentially propagandize and just, have you paying attention over there, or and that's why the other thing that they'll do is name all these crises, like the 2008 housing crash. It's not called the 2008 housing, it's called the 2008 housing crash. Or the Great Recession. It's not called like the Great Recession of capitalism. They never mention the capitalism part of it, in the fact that it is directly tied to capitalism. So I really got to run, y'all. I'm almost up against it. I got a hard stop at 1:35 here. And so I only got 1 minute left to really go. So I'm just going to read a couple of quick comments. Thank you so much for being here. If you're watching this after the fact, please do me a favor. If you haven't already, if you're watching this now or after the fact, do me a favor, hit the like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell. And if you can afford it, please check out the description box below. You'll see a link to my Patreon account in there. It's patreon.com/radical democracy. And if you could please go there and just pledge a few dollars a month for me, whatever you can afford. I really appreciate it. It will help to grow this channel and help to build something. What I intend to do is build a democratic workplace. My goal is to overthrow capitalism, one small socialist democratic workplace at a time. 50 years ago in Mondragon, a priest by the name of Arizmendi, he created a worker cooperative, a democratically operated workplace, and 50 years later now, that workplace that started with 5 people is now grown to over 100,000 people and is the 4th largest corporation in all of Spain. They're a democratic a cooperative of worker cooperatives, and all democratically owned and operated.